If you ask people today who the richest president was, most people instantly say Donald Trump. And honestly, it makes sense. Real estate empire, luxury hotels, private jets, a brand recognized worldwide. Before entering politics, Trump claimed a net worth in the billions. He lived in a gold-plated penthouse in Manhattan. His name was literally stamped on skyscrapers. So, case closed, right? Well, not even close. Because comparing modern wealth to historical wealth is tricky. $1 billion today sounds enormous, but wealth in the 1700s worked very differently. Back then, money wasn't king. Land was. And nobody owned more valuable land than the man we're about to meet.
If not Trump, many people guess another name: John F. Kennedy. The Kennedy family was insanely wealthy. Old money, banking, investments, political dynasty. When JFK became president, he was already born into immense wealth. So surely the richest president must come from America's most famous political family, right? Wrong again. Because even the Kennedy fortune doesn't come close to the wealth of a man who lived nearly 200 years earlier.
Here's where things get fascinating. Historians don't just look at raw dollars. They calculate wealth based on inflation, land ownership, economic power, share of national economy. In simple terms, how powerful was your wealth relative to the entire country? And this is where modern presidents start to look small. When economists adjusted every president's wealth to today's money, a shocking pattern appeared. The richest presidents weren't modern at all. They came from the founding era. Because early America had a tiny economy. Owning massive land back then was like owning entire cities today.
Several early presidents were extremely wealthy. For example, Thomas Jefferson owned thousands of acres of land and a massive plantation. Theodore Roosevelt came from a powerful, wealthy family in New York. Even early leaders like James Madison were major landowners. But none of them came close to the #1 spot. Because one man stood far above the rest. A soldier, a farmer, a general, and eventually, America's first president.
Before the presidency even existed, he was already one of the wealthiest men in the colonies. He owned vast farmland, thousands of acres, multiple properties, and businesses. His estate alone was the size of a small town. By the time he became president, his wealth was equal to hundreds of millions today, possibly over $500 million in modern value. And unlike modern presidents, he didn't earn his wealth from companies or stocks. He earned it from land, agriculture, and ownership of labor.
At the peak of his life, Washington owned over 50,000 acres of land, a huge estate called Mount Vernon, multiple farms and businesses, one of the largest private whiskey distilleries in America. His plantation produced crops, livestock, and massive revenue. In the 1700s, land equals power. Owning that much land meant controlling enormous economic output. Adjusted to today's economy, historians estimate his wealth at around 500 million to 600 million, making him wealthier than any president who came after. Yes, even modern billionaires.
But here's the twist nobody talks about. George Washington didn't even want the presidency. He wanted to retire to his farm. He wanted to live quietly at Mount Vernon. But the country begged him to lead. He left his massive estate, left his businesses, left his private life
to take a job that didn't even have a salary at first. America's richest president took the presidency out of duty, not ambition. The richest man to ever hold the office was also the man who never wanted power. And that is the irony of American history.